Hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah. So it's a pleasure and honor to be moderating. That's all I'm going to be doing up here is moderating this committee. You guys are going to do all the speaking and all the questions and so on. It's actually really great to see you all here. I just live up in the hills of Berkeley, so this is like a short trip down the road for me. So it's a lot of fun. Just in terms of starting out, I think we're going to start out by everybody just spending like 2 or 3, 4 minutes introducing everybody, although I'm sure everybody, and just saying a little bit about why we're here. I do have a kind of a silly but kind of interesting perspective about how I think about things in terms of companies and so on. I think of a company as kind of being like an organism, and it has to enact in this environment. And it can be a very rough environment. If it doesn't act correctly, it's going to die. And so there's all kinds of different organisms. And so it's kind of interesting for me to put the perspective of the questions we're going to be addressing today into that context about there's different kind of organizations. Some of you work in large organizations that were started by others, and you're doing a research kind of activity within organizations. Other views have a deep theoretical, all of you have a deep theoretical background and so on, but you started your own company. And so the whole genesis of the company starts from this kind of theoretical background. So I think they're kind of, and then over time, you notice that companies who start one way over time as they evolve and they kind of sell their products into the market and so on, they evolve and it completely changes in terms of what they need. I remember in the early days, Akamai had this, which is one of those companies that start from a theoretical background, had a huge contingent of theoretical researchers working in it. And then pretty quickly, they kind of downsized that quite a bit because they really had to focus on actually getting out there. And that kind of evolution is something I think it's also interesting to kind of understand and discuss. So with that, I'm going to, please, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Great. Thanks to Shafi and Mike for inviting me to this panel. So I'm Ravi. I work at Google Research in Mountain View. So I've been in industry for my entire career for the last 24 years. First IBM and then Yahoo, and now at Google for the last almost 10 years. So Shafi has given a bunch of questions that I would like to answer. That'll make it easy. So do companies, industries understand the value of basic research? So the answer is a little bit more nuanced. The answer is not fixed over time. So it really depends on the company and the time you're talking about. Luckily for us, at this point in time, I think many companies do understand the value of research, especially theoretical research. So we are in a lucky phase in our times. So does working in company industry enable you to do basic research? Yes. Definitely it enables to do basic research. And has it altered your view of what's important? Again, the answer is a little bit more subtle because it's not what's important, it's more like what things will actually work in practice. So as theoreticians, we tend to look at a lot of problems from different angles. Many of them have certain solutions that we all like, but only some of them actually tend to be applicable in practice. And working in a company definitely opens that vision a little bit more, I feel. So how can we do better feeding off each other? So I think there's a very simple answer to this question. This plus the next one, which is help us raise our salaries. So I strongly encourage faculty to come and spend time in industry. The many companies, including Google, have extensive programs where faculty can come and spend a year or two, either on part-time visiting basis or a full-time basis. I strongly encourage faculty to academicians to come and spend time in industry. And what is it like to have a boss? Again, it depends on the boss, actually. Luckily, I've had great bosses. I still have excellent bosses. So that's the easy answer for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vitaly Feldman. Thanks, Ravi, for answering the questions. I thought we would maybe discuss some of them again and in a more detailed way, but yeah, I'm Vitaly. I work on foundations of machine learning and privacy preserving data analysis. I'm now at Apple in a group with Kunal and also Parikshit, who just joined like a month ago. I worked also my entire not as long career in industry. I was at IBM for 10 years, then at Google Brain for a couple of years, and now I'm at Apple. Since we're talking about the theory in industry, let me just very briefly tell you about these groups. The first one was at IBM, which was a theory group here at IBM Algorand in San Jose. It's sort of, one can think of it as an old school theory group. Many people have spent time there and had very illustrious history with many great people spending time there. It sort of had this model where they bring in theoreticians to work on whatever they like, and then hope to create some kind of incentives so that some sort of impact will come out for the company, without sort of setting specific expectations. They certainly had many great success stories, but maybe also not, there was no systematic way about creating these success stories. And maybe over time, it wasn't the best model, it seems. So then I spent some time at Google Brain after they started this very strong push into deep learning and machine learning and investment in this area in hope to attract researchers and create, they of course recognize the importance of machine learning for the company. I think this was certainly a much more successful model with a lot of interactions, and our group has created some learning algorithms that ended up being used in production. We also worked on privacy, and this is kind of an area which I started liking thanks to my great colleague Kunal. Google maybe wasn't investing as heavily as in privacy as Apple was interested in investing. So more recently, we switched to working on differential privacy and private data analysis at Apple, where we sort of, I think, have maybe the best model, at least in my career so far, where we help people build tools. And while doing this, we discover many interesting problems and understand what sort of is maybe more important. And at the same time, we also, I would say, think of problems which we find interesting, which appeal to our guts of what is going to be important and interesting in the longer term. And we just work on those problems without any connection to the company and publish that work and engage with academia, and hope to continue doing this. Hope I didn't take too long.
Hi, my name is Mariana Raykova, and I'm currently a research scientist at Google. And I think throughout my career, I've been in many different academic and industry settings, where I spent my postdoc at IBM Watson, and then I was a research scientist at SRI, just down here in South Bay. Then I spent a few years as a faculty at Yale, and then I kind of went back to the industry setting at Google. So I think from my perspective, the type of research that I work on and the kind of questions I'm trying to solve haven't changed that much between all of these places where I have been. Maybe the thing that has changed is how I justify why I do what I do. And I think maybe my first experience as a research scientist at the SRI gave me a good training, since this was a place heavily focused on writing grant proposals and being able to kind of succinctly express why you think that what you want to do is going to be useful for other people. But I would also say that even before going to industry, I am probably a theorist at heart, but I like to dabble in practice, and I want to imagine that what I will do will eventually be used by somebody. So in that aspect, I kind of enjoy the closer interaction that the industry setting gives you as an opportunity with people from many different backgrounds, who don't necessarily speak the language of theory, but I think it offers you an opportunity to interact with many very smart people from many different perspectives. And I think at Google, I sit in an organization which is called Privacy, Safety, and Security. And it is curious for me because my research area is cryptography, and somehow there is this interesting interface between cryptography, privacy, security, where practical security systems that exist nowadays and that are kind of the backbone of everything that is happening on the internet or in our machines, use many ad hoc techniques that are not provable security. And at the same time, we as cryptographers have been taught that we really provable security is the right way to formalize things and the right way to go about it. And there is this interface that we sit on how do we go between these ad hoc things that work in practice and we really don't want to turn them off at once, and how do we at the same time kind of communicate the value of things that come with provable security and create incentives to invest in this type of techniques, and to invest even if it comes at some cost, whether this is efficiency cost or like dollar cost or things along those lines. So I think this is a very interesting interface, and I think it's very hard to solve. But I think also in that aspect is important to have people who speak both languages that sit also in industry and that can act as a translators, hopefully. So I think I'll stop with this for now.
Hello, Silvio Micali, academic for a long time, and now turned entrepreneur, and with Algorand Adventure. So the name of, I have not understood exactly, sorry, I didn't read the memo, so there were questions I'm prepared that perhaps I should answer, I don't know. Industry versus Academia for Theoretical Research.
In your case, Silvio, we'd like to know, who is your boss?
My wife, but no, okay. So first of all, I find actually is a very cultural and interesting phenomenon. Why do we think we have to debate researchers versus industry, right? Or discuss, but it's so natural. So I think it comes from a deep sense that we must have. We are having so good as researchers that we say we are a parasite to society because we are doing whatever we like, and we start wondering, are we really relevant? So I don't understand. Of course, you know, industry needs to have research. Everybody has an R&D, or otherwise they die. So we have to be in continual evolution, or if we stop evolving, well, somebody better than us will supplant us, right, to some of our species. So I really think of it, the only difference that I think is a larger paradigm between immediate gratification and postponed gratification. And everybody knows that postponed gratification makes you more gratified. However, if you postpone too much, then it's too late, right? So the point is that you're not alive to enjoy it. So I think that research can be very much close to, in my opinion, research ought to be relevant, at least. By the way, historically, we only know about the research that has been relevant, because every rest is not going to be in the history book. Nobody knows about it anymore, right? So whether you like it or not, so you're going to be remembered if you're going to be relevant, not immediately, but at some point in time. So how much you want to be disjoined from what becomes relevant, that is really a matter of taste. I think that we need to have an equilibrium among all things. Among all the industry, where the one portion of the industry which is really immediately attached to research is the startup. Because a startup, if it keeps on doing the same thing the regular industry does, it doesn't grow, it's going to maybe suffocate. So that is really where I think that there is innovation and research and immediate applicability, they are most tied. For the rest is an healthy equilibrium. So just, you know, don't feel guilty, do whatever you want, try to be relevant as much as you want if you want to be remembered, because that is a crucial point. And I think there is nothing to explain, it's not a mystery, it's a continuum. That's the way I look at it.
So what's interesting about what you said, Silvio, is that among the folks here, you're probably the only one who's quote unquote in a startup, the one that you started.
Yeah, that is, but my style in research is the same. So somehow I'm Shafi can tell you, no, it's usually I cannot read a paper. Because I had to get in somebody else's mind and what the notation, when I would set up a notation, I get lost right away. So it's much easier for some of us, it's really a question of style. Say you write your own paper rather than reading your own paper and figure out what they say. And so I think it is a matter of taste. We are all welcome here. Everybody has a different style, and if you are a particular style, the startup is your right industry. Or some other else is the consulting to an industry that they really want to open to research is great. It's good to have researchers inside the industry, but remember, everybody's better advised to have actually help from academia, because really academia, I think, is a really a great place to do to industry and try to figure out what's going on out there. But I think that it's so natural that is to say pasta and body weight. I mean, of course they are related. I can't think that there is a way should be a debate between research and industry. To me, it's so clear. But
so maybe the question though is a little different, Silvio, because there've been you're absolutely right, but there's been many cases like Xerox, for example, where they had a fantastic research, but it was completely divorced from their commercial, and they didn't transfer across, right? And so there are companies that came in there and really benefited from that. For example, Apple, right? Yeah. But they themselves did not. So I guess the question is a little more nuanced, is how can you effectively have research into these companies so they actually can move the, be in sort of sync with the company and at large and really benefit the company, but also kind of.
So I'm eager to pass the microphone to my left, fine, but insofar you ask me. So I mean, of course, Xerox is one. Olivetti is another one. You know that the touch screen was actually done by Olivetti before even Apple took it. Italian connection. So the point is that companies screw it up very often. So very often they don't understand where the value is and what the role in life is. So I don't believe it is partly the effort of the researchers to go to upper manager and say, you don't understand how much value you have here. Is also the other way for upper management, sure. But it's not another responsibility for us. Is a dynamic. Sometimes people screw it up in many ways in which they don't communicate, right? Does it ring a bell? Do you have a spouse? You don't communicate enough. So it's of course communication is very important. But I don't believe that there is a crisis. Is that somebody makes a mistake once in a while, but most of the time we communicate and we get along and we improve, right?
Okay, let's continue and we'll come back to it.
Okay, hi, I'm Yael Kalai. Actually, before I start, I wanted to say a huge thank you for Simons, for this amazing past 10 years, for Dick, for Shafi, for all the amazing support staff. It's been really, really wonderful for us as a community and for me in particular for the great time I've had here along the years. So thank you. And in terms of my own journey, I actually dabbled a lot about the question of academia and versus industry. I started off in academia only for 1 year. Then I moved to Microsoft. I was at Georgia Tech, and then I moved to Microsoft Research, and where I am until today. And in the last 6 years, I also joined as an adjunct professor at MIT. So I've been kind of in both places at once. And I've been thinking a lot about what are the differences? What do I like about each style and so on? And industry is very versatile. I mean, of course, each university is different as well, but at least in university, all universities have the same goal, which is to educate and to do excellent academic research. In industry, it's much more versatile than that, and the goals are not the same. So there are some companies where the goal is really to just advance the state of the art. They have like basic research labs. And then in other companies, the goals may be different. And they want research that only kind of aligns with the company's vision and maybe in very specific subjects and so on and so forth. So at Microsoft Research, and particularly in my lab, which is in Boston, there's actually a big support for kind of basic academic research. And I had 100% freedom to do whatever I want and to do the research that, I think is important. And I think, that was very valued. So in that sense, is academia the same? Actually, we do share the same core values. So is it the same? And for my own opinion, I think, and actually yesterday I talked about with Abhishek Jain, who gave me kind of a big a thought that really inspired me, which is really the big difference between academia and any kind of research lab is that in academia, we are parents of the students. And you really sit with students and you educate them and you work with them. And that kind of relationship and that kind of energy of doing research with young kind of students who are so eager and so enthusiastic and so kind of their eyes kind of pop up, you know, when they do the research. This is really the big difference, in my opinion, between academia and any kind of research lab. So, okay, I'll end with that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Parikshit Gopalan. I'm currently a researcher at Apple. I joined about 1 month back. I've spent my entire career in industry. I was at Microsoft Research in Silicon Valley until 2014. I was at Microsoft Redmond for a year or so after that. I was at VMware until about a month ago. And actually, when I got this very generous invitation from Shafi, I was at VMware. But then I pulled a bait and switch on them. By the time it came to the actual event, here I am at Apple. So because of this, I actually didn't get this email that Shafi sent out. It was sent to my VMware address. So I was planning to come here and pretend that I don't know her questions, but Ravi reminded me of what they are. So anyway, so I think a good starting point, I'm going to follow up on what Mike Luby said at the very start, right? About we are all mortal beings doomed to die. In industry, you're especially aware of this. Now, just to do a thought experiment. If we made a list of the top universities 50 years ago, it's going to look just like the list today. If we made a list of the top 50 companies or industrial research labs 50 years ago, pretty sure none of the companies represented here would be on that list, right? So this is just, this is where you start from, that things change rapidly. So, and industries, they have to be constantly aware of this, and they have to be, ready for this change. And in fact, this is one reason why a lot of companies do invest in research. They believe that this is kind of the vanguard of change, and investing in research is our best, I won't say defense against this, but this is how we are going to be leading this change rather than succumbing to it. So what does it mean to be a theoretician in industry? How is it different from being in academia? In my view, and this is completely my personal view, I'm not speaking for any company or anybody else, I think the primary difference is it comes from where you source your problems, right? Like I come to a symposium like this today. Every talk is just amazing. You could spend your whole life just diving into any one of these things. Yet, when you're in industry, what is the opportunity that you have, right? There are all these problems around you, and the real world is incredibly complex. There's, there's people constantly putting out fires. Systems are incredibly complicated. There's not too many people with the kind of training and background we have, where you look at something and then you try and find the right abstraction for it. You try and think, is there something I have in my toolbox as a theorist that I can bring to bear on this? Is there a clean definition waiting to be, is there a clean definition waiting to be made here or something like that? So one criticism which is common in jest of theorists is that we spend days trying to optimize for constants in our theorems. It's true. We spend weeks trying to find the right proofs, and we spend years trying to find the right definitions. I think this is the major thing that we bring, appropriately enough for an area that started with a definition, right? So a lot of the really important contributions historically, whether it's information or coding theory, or more recently with things like differential privacy, has been to take these very impossible looking problems and try to find nice, clean formulations for them. This is ongoing work now, whether it's fairness, correctness in machine learning, and so on. And being a researcher in industry, I think it gives you an opportunity to be very close to this aspect of it, right? In some sense, I think for the broader theory community, we serve this role as being, we see where the rubber hits the road. We see the kinds of things that are important and could benefit from a theoretician's perspective. So yeah, in my sense, that is what it means to be a theorist in industry. That's the opportunity. That's what makes it exciting. How is it different? It's the constant change.
Great, thank you. Well, I have a million questions, but I think to make it more interesting, I'm going to ask the audience if they have questions. If you don't, I certainly have a bunch. So if there's topics or interest of what you guys want to ask, please, this is a good time to step up.
I wonder if any one of you has maybe an example of where something that was very much thought to be pure theoretical actually had an impact.
Okay, sorry. Let's make this a serious question, right? Like, I mean, let me give a serious answer to what is a serious question. I mean, I think this is probably true of so many of the ideas in theory, right? Like, yeah. I was at SVC in the early days of differential privacy. I mean, there was just a lot of skepticism, both internal and external, about whether there's anything really happening here beyond people writing a lot of nice papers. And now, you look at the world around us, that debate has been definitively settled, right? So that's just perhaps one example where, I think Silvio was talking about examples in the context of consensus. In fact, if anything, maybe we should ask the opposite question of, I'm sure there are ideas which the moment you write a paper, everybody realizes that this is a great thing and it goes and changes the world. That's rarely how things happen. I mean, you would be lucky for things to happen that way, but that's really the exception to the rule, not the rule.
I wanted to add to that actually in cryptography, I think it's a huge success story that a lot of the research that has been done, really purely theoretical research, is now being used all over the place. I mean, Silvio is one example, but even look at PCPs. I remember I was a student at MIT, and I remember Eli Ben Sasson working in. I remember this discussion of, but who will ever use PCPs? Isn't it frustrating to work on this purely, theoretical thing that will never be used? And now look, I know 15, 20 years later. So I actually agree with Silvio, what you said in the talk, which is good ideas find their use. Maybe not next year, maybe not 10 years, maybe if you're lucky 20, if you're less likely 50, but if it's a good idea, it will, then it would be recognized.
I think as and when quantum computers become real, that'll be another great answer to your question.
Yeah.
Well, those were actually, it was much more immediate, right? Like I mean, actually that I was going to use that in an answer to another of Shafi's questions. She asked, is basic research appreciated in industry? The paper that we wrote about these things, it's really a lower bound. But if there's one tried and tested formula for success in coding theory, it's that you put a lower bound out there and let people go and find matching upper bounds. They'll be doing this for years after. But
input, yes.
Thank you all for these great thoughts. So I had a question especially connected to what Shangwa was also saying yesterday. I think in some ways, like some of the criticism of the theory community sometimes has been that we are sort of inwards looking, or as sometimes phrased, we get the good problems from the people we respect. But we go back long enough, at some point somebody abstracted a question you were trying to solve. Balance separator, which we recognize as a clean problem, was formulated to try to capture VLSI circuits. And all of you in the industry, as you just mentioned, Parikshit, you're working close enough to people really struggling, trying to solve problems. And you as a theorist training, you can try to formulate an abstract question you can say something useful about. What could we do to increase this kind of an exchange where we as a community have more exposure to things, to questions people are looking for better answers to, where we could ground to source new problems, new interesting questions that could become relevant, less than 50 years, as in Silvio's, say 10 years, right? A decade would be a great timeline to go from identifying a practical problem, formulating it, giving something useful that comes back a circle in a decade.
As far as I'm aware, I think almost all of the big industry companies have programs for interaction with academia. I think there are many opportunities to kind of write together like a little proposal and to start collaboration with some researchers at the company. At least I can talk for Google because I'm involved with some of these programs, but I think many of the other companies have similar initiatives. I think another maybe avenue is that at least in the area of privacy, there is a lot of kind of public discussion happening. And here I'll use the opportunity to plug in something that I've been involved in, and I think it would benefit more eyes on it, which is kind of this effort to reinvent the web economic community and web advertising, where there's this public working group, which is called PATCG, where essentially all major companies that are represented here are sitting together and trying to figure out what is a good way to create new privacy preserving way to organize this community. And I think there is like a wealth of problems there that I don't think we have even scratched the surface of what can be solved and what will be the different approaches. And I think these problems go way beyond computer science and theoretical computer science. But if people are adventurous enough to like want to look at and dabble in this space, I think one of my goals has been to encourage more people from academia to kind of participate in these communities. And I think that goes to many other problems and questions, that there is quite a public discussions in many of these areas, and they give quite nice opportunities for collaboration as well.
So I have a couple of questions. One is actually after Silvio's talk, Umesh came to me and he said that you misunderstood his question. He said that it seemed you convinced us completely that there is no reason to do anything different than what you guys are doing in Algorand, and certainly not to do proofs of work and to do Bitcoin. Why isn't the whole world doing it? So this brings a bigger question, and that is sometimes we know that the technology that a company has, let's say in Digital Fountain or something, it is much better than what everybody else is doing. And yet that doesn't necessarily conquer the world, which tells you that something is, I don't want to use profanities, but something is wrong, okay? And I mean, I know this even from my own experience. I mean, there is technology and there's everything else. And technology does not rule. And I don't think it's a question of practice or constants. It's something else, which is where industry, I think, I find it extremely frustrating.
And I think it's related to what Silvio also said this morning, which was, didn't happen after year one, it didn't happen after year two, not 5, not 10, not 15, maybe 20, 25 years. Sometimes, the world is just not ready for a certain technology, or it's just not the right market or applications out there. And if that's true, it's just not going to happen.
Is the world ready for privacy?
Well, that's a great question.
World is ready for privacy.
When are we going to have privacy Chernobyl that will tell the world that it needs it?
Well, I do think it seems like 50, 60% of the people sitting up here are working in privacy in big companies. So I don't think there does seem to be a focus on that. But Silvio, you obviously want to say something.
At least this is, I don't know if it's a general topic, but is a pointed question. In my opinion, the world is ready for privacy. Is certain monopolistic industry who are not ready for privacy. And therefore, the public is not informed, they lobby whatever it is, if not happening. So right now, we are in the business in which a few companies have figured out if they can get your data and make you a slave and deprive what everything is rightfully yours and sell it, they can be profitable. Privacy is absolutely their enemy. If you want to put back that, we are the owner of our own data, and thank you very much, I will sell it to you if I want, or if you want to ask me for, thank you. So, or if you want to ask, do you want to send me an advertisement? I'll let you know which subject I'm open to receive an advertisement. And here is an account in which every time you want to advertise to me, you shall pay. So I think that the people they don't even know if it's possible because nobody's going to tell them this, right? So that is an issue that is a very much, a political issue, and somehow it is, right, they organized few that have a very big control over society at large because they are organized, they have the money, and you don't, and you have to go and say, can you give them a subscription some year later? So that's what you have to do. You're competing with an organized amount of money. But the world needs privacy, for heaven's sake. So we are, privacy is really at the core of what we are. And so, but I don't think we can blame industry. I think there's going to be a huge commercial advantage for the first. If you really want to organize it, back a company that is going to start a search engine or whatever it is, done on different principles, and you shall see that if you do it, then these economics are going to change everybody else for the better. But
I really hoped I can fight with Silvio and kind of be against him so we can have an interesting, conversation here. But I agree.
And I think that I didn't have to say this. And it does seem like we need a privacy Chernobyl for this kind of change to happen. We'll see if it will happen or not, but the amount of data that companies have on us, and including variant, scrupulous companies and governments, is already huge. So there might be.
So we are in violent agreement. The only thing that disagree, that's Chernobyl has already happened. And the point is that we don't want to recognize it, for somehow we don't recognize it. So that is, in my opinion. So whatever it was the last so many data disappearing, before they were private. But why? Do you think that, somehow the fact that you are enraged because they want to send you documents or things that are going to make you even more enraged and more ready to click on something is not an invasion of your privacy? Don't we know that? I cannot even be on the web and I get enraged immediately. So I think, who is going to pay for this emotional loss? So I mean, this is happening. We just don't recognize it. So that's a tragedy. I don't think we have to go further than that.
Some people are more sensitive to radiation than others, I guess.
So pays. Sex used to pay. That was a good old time. Now rage pays even more. That's apparently is the case. And so and we are actually bombarded by things that they turn us one way or another. And somebody benefits from it. And that, why did this happen? Because of violation of privacy. Because you know exactly how to push my buttons by sending an advertisement, sending a video, sending me something, and vice versa. And so somehow that is the form visible, but not classified correctly by the public form of what is the cost of an invasion of privacy. You have a split country, A, it's non-A and vice versa. What else do we want? Whatever cost are we, what is the higher cost than that? It used to be united and no longer are. So thanks to a few people who collect money, benefited from all this, growing age. I think if this is not a Chernobyl for invasion of privacy, I don't know what it is.
So just to maybe to not end with Chernobyl, I just interested in thoughts on how can industry and academia work best together to advance science?
So I want to say something about that. I feel like recently there are much more connections actually between research and academia. There all of a sudden this idea of doing kind of part-time. I mean, I think it exists in the past, but not as much as now. I think a lot of academics spend some time in industry, and I think the more we do it, I think also now especially is a great time because somehow there's been so much change in the past couple of years, with COVID and remote working, and all of a sudden everything is possible. People realize that, you know what, we don't have to stick into old habits. And I think if the more kind of connections, the more kind of academics spend a day a week, 2 days a week, the more this kind of space of research will be fluid between academia and industry, I think we'll all gain from it. And you see it, I see it in companies, I see it like in Algorand, you have like amazing academics come and work for a year, for a sabbatical. The more I think this will exist, the better our own research will be, especially because what was said here, I agree that in academia, sometimes it's too easy to publish papers which simply improves the bound of the previous paper, not because necessarily it's the interesting thing, but it's easy to get in because the people who will review it are the ones who posed the previous bound and they didn't solve it. So they think it's an important question. So they'll, want what we really need is to ask the right questions, the interesting questions. And I think the more we think like, we're not only in our own little pond, kind of answering the question that were posed in the previous, conferences, the more we'll be open to new notions, new ideas, new definitions. And I think we'll really benefit from it.
Can I engage with this real quick? I'm really interested in this point because, my takeaway from the recent increase in the fluidity between industry and academia was the opposite, which is that often, the sort of, intellectual spaces that academia had carved out, spaces of independence and intellectual growth, were sort of undermined by industry objectives. And I didn't have the sense that this led to better questions. This led to a bunch of grad students chasing, OKRs and industry objectives and like cranking out models instead of having brand new ideas, instead of discovering the next generation of something entirely new, right? Why do we think that industry is providing disruptive inspiration to our smartest minds? Why shouldn't they look at, somewhere else, the other departments on campus, for instance, right? And so my experience at Berkeley was the opposite, to be quite honest.
Hold on, sorry. This is a tag team question or comment. Sorry, we did discuss it. That's why. I also just wanted to tag onto that. So I think it's perfectly okay that there will be a group of people who want to work in industry and entrepreneurship and policy and whatever it is, and that people get to sort of follow their bliss in that way. For some of us, for me, for instance, right, I recognize that a lot of industry is profit driven. I mean, that's just what it's supposed to do. And when you're trying to maximize for profit, that creates perverse incentives that lead to, you discuss privacy. There's a whole bunch of other issues that happen as well. And so my research is concerned with those perverse incentives, right? And the harms that they cause to real people and especially marginalized groups of people. And in my sort of extremely brief experience with industry, and then this was at Microsoft Research, which I think is sort of as close to academia as it gets, as people say, I felt like that was not a space where I could do that research at all. I actually sort of ended up pulling out of an internship at Google that before I did it, because I just felt like I couldn't do the work that I do with the integrity that it deserves in industry. And in academia, I found that I'm still kind of feeling infringed, actually, right? I'm not sort of able to have the independence to do the research that I do, because at the end of the day, many of my colleagues do spend time in industry. Many of my colleagues are still driven by industry objectives. A lot of people split their time. A lot of the work that I do that's not necessarily sort of benefiting industry is sort of seen sometimes as not valuable because it's trying to benefit something else, right? And so I recognize that for some people, this industry connection might be positive, but for some people, for those of us for whom it's not a positive connection, what can industry do and what can academics do to protect the sort of the space that needs to be carved out and protected away from industry so that we can do the research that we do with some integrity.
That's a great point. And you did bring up another great point, which is it's a huge difference between academia and industry. Industry is not just partially driven by profit, but completely driven by profit. And so that does, it raises another question is where do the great ideas for other sort of things come from? Do they really come from industry? Maybe not so much, right? So maybe many of the great ideas actually come out of academia, and some of them grow into companies, some of them grow into other things. So that's another thing I kind of wanted to kind of get your guys' opinion on, but maybe you can react to this first.
Yeah, I guess I want to react to your
Yes.
point, and also touch upon what you said, Mike, which is that is very unfortunate. I completely agree. When I say, you can benefit from industry, what I mean is you can benefit from thinking about real world problems. That's kind of what my point was, that sometimes it's too comfortable in academia to ask the wrong question. It's just because it's our comfort. It's so easy. And it's so when you look at industry, you get kind of more of like, what does the real world need right now? Yes, you're right that it's profit driven, but that's kind of what's profitable in some sense. Not always. I agree. For example, the privacy issue, right? Where people try to stream you with junk, advertisement. But often, or at least sometimes, what gives you profit is what the world needs. That's what's profitable. And these questions you see at industry.
I'm not sure if we had a raise of hands, people would agree with you.
Who agrees with Yael?
You want to take a poll? All right. Who disagrees with Yael? Okay.
So maybe I would like to add something. To me, it has always felt that also academics are kind of keeping industry honest to some extent, in the sense that there are many attack papers, right, that come out of academia that are looking at products or like practices in industry that are pinpointing issues with them. And I don't think they're always accepted in a negative way, right? This is something that is keeping people in industry honest. And in most cases, these things are tried to be taken seriously and are tried to be addressed in some way. Maybe there is no direct way immediately, but I do think this kind of interaction is also kind of constructive and helps industry improve and kind of create some healthy interaction. And I also agree that there are some interesting problems coming from industry, and there are things that sit completely separately, and there's space for both of them. And I think trying to respect and understand this is kind of the core of the interaction that doesn't always have to be necessarily work on the same problem.
So maybe another thing too, there's a lot of, it's great there's so many hands up.
Before I thought that was a...
No, that's great.
Sorry, I want to pick up an important point for our friend over there, the extreme. Pardon? Radian. Okay, thanks. And I think it is right. So we try to, we are divided up in institutions, right, even in academia, that they are pretty much similar to one another. And so therefore, if you don't like A, you can go to A prime, but it's not to B or C, it's another one, they're all equal. And so ideally, you would like to have some more diversity, that there are some university that applies to the same rule of tenure and independence, but you can actually pick and choose the one that is close to you. We don't have that somehow to a large extent. So what I wonder is, however, given our ability to coalesce around the same idea and even through donation investments or whatever you call it, to try to put money into something which is more that we like, but we can actually create some hybrid structure later. But I believe before the current technology and communication technology and things, we could not even find each other. But I think that I would like to have different type of university with different objectives, and then people can actually follow where they go. But to be, I don't have a recipe, but I think I recognize the problem. And so very often, and I believe that diversity in our gene pool, diversity in our decentralization, I would say, from the standpoint of the industry that I right now represent, is a good thing. And so somehow, there is a lot of homogeneity in the society, which I don't believe is to our benefit. Both in the industry and in academia, and if you can try to solve it, it's just an observation. I have no recipe, right? But I think you have a good point. You're making a good point.
Yeah, I think that one obvious one that comes to mind for me is public versus private institutions. So I think public institutions.
Yeah, we need the mic. No, it's right here.
I'm joking, Shafi did not leave with the mic. I was just saying that I agree with you. I think it would be nice to have a variety of institutions, and right now we don't have that. And for me, when I started my career not that long ago, and for me, there's a big difference between, in my mind at least, a big difference between public and private institutions. Public institutions are meant to serve the public. I mean, they have a very different mandate than private institutions. And it's not to excuse private institutions, but I felt like, being here at Berkeley, an institution that I love very much, to see the level of privatization of things that is happening within this institution has been really hard for me to kind of to grapple with, right? So I think that one of the things that we could do as an academic community is to think critically about how we can better protect public institutions at least, and then kind of take it from there. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Right. So I think one point I also like to get your feedback, which let me remove this. Right. To a large degree, connect to some of those points is that I don't want to reveal my age, but when I was a PhD student at CMU, I happened to took the last class of Rashid. At that time, when taught that class, he went to Microsoft. And as a student at that time, we think he's nuts, right? But that's because at that junction in the late 80s or early 90s, we always have this image that the academic is somehow the cutting edge. But then as time goes on in computing, I think it is more and more sense that a lot of the type of work, academic is no longer in the cutting edge. The industry as an institution contain a lot of cutting edge, right? So I think this changing of dynamic really, create an interesting new balance in between the role between academic and the industry. So I don't know in long term, how this dynamic will go. It's only because our current computer science is rising. So clearly, this is the moment the industry is driving. For theories, clearly slightly differently. We can still improve on previous results, for example.
Well, I think that's, it's very dependent on what you're talking about, right? Like for areas within theory, like if you're working on, say, the unique games conjecture or analysis of Boolean functions, these are very core scientific areas, and it's something that a community needs to invest in. And obviously, industry is not the place where the cutting edge for this happens, right? So there's a bit more nuance to it. I don't think it's just one way or the other. It depends on what area. I still don't know if you could say most of the cutting. It's a balance, I think, still, right?
So I want to add to what Parikshit is saying. I think it really depends on the area, even the 90s or 80s. It's still the case that if you look at some other topic like, say, VLSI fabrication, probably industry was still the leader, right? Not academia. So I think it depends on the topic. And now machine learning is really vogue, and therefore we get a feel that, okay, all the cutting edge work happens in industry, but it's a bit more different than that.
So I have a question. So obviously, as people working in industry, you don't have the same protections that say people in the university, you don't have tenure, same protections of academic freedom. But do you feel like you have some kind of a duty as academics to keep some, say, red lines in terms of like, say, if you're asked not to publish a paper or to modify your paper because of company, it's not positive for the company's image or something like that? Is that a red line, or do you think there are kind of limitations that you need to protect?
All right, another question along that line. Are there things that you don't publish just because the company wants to keep it secret till they kind of take advantage of it, so to speak?
Yes, I mean, I think, yeah, I think I completely understand. This is different.
Okay.
Well, there are many answers here, you know. So we want to attract a certain type of people, okay, that are uniquely qualified to advance, you know. And this type of people, I'm not going to be stopped by not published papers. So if you really want to attract those people, you let them publish whatever you want. And you are better off that they are, you know, just a coffee cup away than just, you know, somewhere else altogether. So so absolutely there is, you know, I understand that there is a legitimate need for some people to give it, but you know, at least, you know, in a startup or in a right startup, I think that's, you know, is counterproductive. So,
For me, would totally be a red line, for sure.
So both, in my experience, like I've never had a single instance where my paper was blocked saying that no, you cannot publish it because it's going to make us look bad. So I think the number of instances of such things are very rare, I believe.
And also, I never ran it, but certainly being a theoretician helps with this. Like, it's just, but I
That's a good point.
Privacy would get into this if we are going to say something like Apple's, Apple's model is not.
right. That is true. Being sort of on the inside side of the industry in general, I cannot criticize my company or any other company, in fact, just because I cannot say that Google is not private, whether I believe this or not. It's just, yes, there are some limitations. I did not personally have to ever run into this in my publications, because my publications are mostly theoretical, but it is, again, I didn't run into this, but I can certainly imagine some people, and there have been instances, and maybe some people will want, other people not on the panel will want to share their experience, that certainly can exist and could be a red line for some people.
So like Vitaly, I'm not allowed to criticize other companies, but I think I can say good things about other companies. So let me tell you my experience when we were in Azure, right? Like, so we came up with these codes, and then we wanted to write a paper about it. We were expecting that there would be some extent of, you know, don't give the secret sauce away kind of thing. But instead, they were very happy to publish everything explicit. You want to implement these codes yourself? Go read the paper. We tell you what coefficients or what finite field to use. And we were somewhat surprised by this. We asked, like, aren't you worried that you're giving the crown jewels away? They were, no, what we want is mind share. We want people to know that, you know, we have cool stuff, and, you know, we want, so the way people think about these is nuanced. It's not as simple as, you know, one might think. This, of course, raises the possibility that other people would just read what you did and copy it. And we know instances we think where that happened, but, you know, it's part of the risk you take.
So I actually wanted to go back to one point that was raised before, which is this sort of who's driving the agenda? Is it in the industry or is it the academia in terms of driving the research agenda? I think it's something that was brought up earlier, and that's something I kind of wanted to. It seems like I'm hearing that maybe the industry is driving the agenda a little bit.
The industry people say so. I'm saying I'm not sure. The agenda is driven by whoever drives it.
Well, that's another question I wanted to raise, and I'm just curious. Like everybody's sort of thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go work in some company or whatever." But another avenue is to do what you did, Silvio, for example, is go and start a company. So that's another avenue. If you're really sort of, really excited about something and some new area that you really want to get out there, and it's got some legs to it, then you go and start your own company, and that's the best way to kind of get stuff out there, I think. It's difficult.
But I want to say, I think if a company takes researchers and tells them what to work on, it's stupid.
Yeah.
Like they ruined, it's like cutting, then don't take researchers. That's not a researcher's job. A researcher's job is, you're open-minded and you come up with ideas. You can't tell, it's so counterproductive.
Right. But we did hear earlier that there was a lot of industry sort of driving the agenda of what's going on in the academic world, right?
But I think it's not so like narrow that the industry tells you this is exactly the problem. I think it broads, like it's a broader strokes of like where are the interesting things, what are we struggling with, like and I think from that point on, I think academics, in my experience, like we have these grants that people take them and like go and do all kinds of other interesting things that may or may not be remotely connected to what was the initial motivation for the problem. And I think also my experience as a researcher in industry is like nobody comes to tell me what to do, right? It's my job to like look around me and figure out where what I am good at can be used, or what kind of problems I will formulate for myself.
Yeah, I see that, but I've seen also there's been problems with that. I mean, there's been examples where that's grown to a certain point, like ANTT, right? Where it became so independent and so divorced from the company that at some point the hammer comes down and they slam the whole thing. I know the same thing happened at some portions of Microsoft at some point, right? And IBM and other places, right? So there is this tricky kind of trade-off there. It's not so straightforward.
Personally, I don't find it offensive that if one interested, say, I'm open to research in this subject, and if you're interested in another subject,
right,
come here, spend 5 years. As long as you're interested, when you're not interested, you move it somewhere else, which is more interested. That is okay. But I wanted to say that another wrinkle I want to put that in all this, research versus industry, we are doing extremely well, and our society is so dynamic. And just because we have invested as a society an insane amount of money into public education. Without this, that really started programmatically the new national state 100 years ago, there would be no academia. There would be some 1, 2, 3, 4 academic places repeating theology or whatever we're doing, for years on end. So it really public. So the debate, in my opinion, is when also Radian was talking about public or private. Sometimes, I come from a different tradition, right, in which is most of research is done in a public institution. Let me tell you, there is no tenure there. You are tenure the moment you get in. You can get an advanced position and then another advanced position. But you're tenure no matter what. And there are some benefits and there are some negativity. Certainly, you have a lot of independence. But then the negative is that you have to work national competition before hiring anybody, rather than in a private university you can hire on the spot very quickly, very efficiently. So you lose people abroad or to the private university just because you cannot so nimble in reacting. But I really think that we have to be more prepared. And Christos here had an idea about what we are trying to optimize for genes and things. So I think we want to do not immediately improving things, but to have enough resilient apparatus for whatever changes may come. I really believe that, by the way, we don't invest enough in public education. So in this country, great country of ours, which has many benefits, but also many things were not exactly optimized. So all middle school, high schools are really local. They are funded with local money. If you are in a poor neighborhood, you get poorly paid teacher. Is this a way we optimize? It's hard to me to believe what the hell are we optimizing? There is no way to do it. So whether there is interest or things is the same narrow silos that they don't come up. So I think we are better off just to have, salary on a national basis and let get, great teachers be everywhere and educate everybody. Because at the end, we are doing minutiae, industry, academia, the thing, the real thing is that the larger part of our countrymen is not as educated as they could be.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And it's a problem because there is not enough idea coming up. So pretty soon we're going to pay a price, 50, 100 years from now.
Oh, that's a good point. I have a big question asked. Who's keeping the time here? Nobody is. I think we're in trouble then. So it's kind of getting late. I think we should probably wrap it up. Anybody want to have any last thoughts or comments?
I have one quick thing to say as a remark to what Silvio said before, which is that's exactly why I think fluidity is so important. Because, because exactly, you want people to come to your company and do what they want to do. So if today they're interested in consensus, they should come today. If they should not, they should leave. That's why you want the fluidity, people to come for 6 months while they're interested, then they leave. Then that's how I think the model should be.
Yeah.
Hazak. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for making the event a spectacular success. Hope to see you.